Hello and welcome to the MA's review of the week. I'm the morning advertiser, Ed Bedington, and with me today I have the wonderful Dom Jacobs with the Ardent Group. Good morning, Dom.
Morning, how are you?
I'm good, sir. I'm good. How are you? How's trade at the moment?
Trade's actually very, very good for us. We are exceeding our budgets so far this year. Obviously, only 6 weeks in, 5.5 weeks. So, but yeah, we are happy. Currently, is how things are going. So long may it last.
Always a good position to be in. Always a good position. So we're here to talk about the week's events. What's caught your eye this week?
So for me, I think where do we start this week? We could kick things off with perhaps the news that Gordon Ramsay's increasing service charge to 20% across his restaurants. I thought that was quite interesting because we are, October 24, where the Tipping Act came into force. And I appreciate this is perhaps more of a London-centric and some of the bigger cities where service charge forms a larger part of kind of the payroll operation of venues. But I think it's interesting as sort of a year and a half into the Tipping Act and what it's actually meaning for people, because people's payroll systems had to change. Like it or not, the system in the cities is designed for service charge, and so to majorly overhaul that system with a new law is going to have an impact. And I think it's interesting seeing Gordon raising his head above the parapet, saying, "Well, actually, the service charge has to go up." This is, there are no more. There's no wiggle room in restaurants, and I think most restaurants, certainly any restaurants that I knew, operated what I would deem a very fair service charge system. I don't think no one's taking admin fees or anything else like that. But I think one of the big challenges that it brought in is this: that if you want to offer a stable salary over the course of the year as an employer, it did make those things quite difficult. And I imagine businesses such as Ramsay's, and I've seen it elsewhere, service charge creeping up in order to fulfill the sort of salary levels all year round for everybody that have been previously agreed. I think people are finding pressure now, and on the quieter months, without the ability to kind of top up where necessary and sort of prop up the service charge from quieter months. It's clearly having an impact, and I imagine that's the root cause of it for Ramsay.
Would you increase your service charge? Would you follow?
We have done at points. We sort of have some red lines as a business. We've had to look at it. There was a point where we had to look at it on a monthly basis post-pandemic to try and manage it as best as possible. It's something that we're reviewing constantly. Currently, we're not. We don't have an issue there, but it's a constant balancing act. Whereas before, it was something that you could take a view on over the course of the year, and I think by and large that was a fair system. At that point, the change has meant that we need to review it more closely now, because the flexibility is not there. And I think that I suppose one of the frustrations of the business, who I think operated a very fair system at the start, is that people who were operating it in such a manner, that it was largely to the benefit of the employee to make sure everyone has a stable income. I have in the past operated service charge systems where it entirely flexes just based on points month by month, and I can assure you, and I'm sure many of the listeners would agree, that it all sounds great in principle, but come January, when everyone has an enormous paycheck, it's very hard to convince them that it's probably a good idea to set some of that money aside for a quieter month in August. It doesn't work like that. So I suppose it begs the wider question: is where does service charge fit in London restaurants or in UK restaurants? Sorry, I'm being very London-centric there, but where does it fit? And are we moving more towards an American model in the UK? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a tricky thing to manage.
I would say not. Let's go down that road. Joey, what else has caught your eye?
The other, I think this is a kind of sort of a fake headline in many respects, but it managed to get covered in many places. But the £10 pint hitting London. I thought that was slightly unfair and maybe a bit of a. I think if you just took it as read across the country, everyone is now probably avoiding London like the plague. That it transpires it's one rooftop bar in Mayfair is charging
a hotel,
a hotel bar, 5-star hotel on a rooftop is charging £10.
Has probably been charging £10 a pint and more.
Well, exactly. And then the other people quoted, well, the other people referenced in there as charging £10 a pint are actually some of the most prestigious hotels who are charging £10 a bottle. And that is the one that should be more shocking, and that's been going on for a very long time. You know, everybody knows you can buy a case of Peroni, let's say, in the supermarket for whatever, 20 quid on offer at points. The fact that you buy one bottle for £12 in a Mayfair bar.
There's a certain element of me saying that if you're choosing to drink in those kind of bars, then you deserve to be paying £10.
Yeah, quite. But you know, it does. The wider story here is obviously the same thing. It's the costs that are hitting pubs from April onwards, and I suppose on a more serious note, seeing so Tim Martin's statement that Wetherspoons is looking at another 60 million in costs this year, and therefore issuing a sort of a profit warning to that degree. And I think you know, whenever I worry or look at my increases year on year, to see something like that, 60 million uplifts in costs, might make me feel slightly better. But the impact is obviously going to be the cost of a pint. I think he's been quite clear on that. You know, we can't keep our prices there. I would say, on contrary to that, there is, in my view, a growing trend of places doing sort of happy hours on pints now in quieter periods, so that you can actually get a lot cheaper.
Yes,
it is going both ways in some respects. I suppose as the counter to this, people see it as an opportunity where they can, in quieter periods, to offer better value there. But yeah, I think it's just a bit of a leveler, isn't it? When you see those figures from the likes of Sir Tim, it is it just makes you realise, really, on a macro level. Yeah, difficult times.
But on a more positive note, we've got the World Cup coming up.
It is, yeah, and I read that 55 million extra pints will be served. And interestingly, the same people who are talking about the £10 pint then said, if we average the price of a pint at £5, then that makes £275 million in extra spend. So it just goes to show the sort of bias of the newspapers when covering stories around pubs. But yeah, I think it's an amazing thing for the industry. The World Cup, we're seeing fantastic bookings already, really exciting corporate booking. It really does create a fever, and pubs are obviously the beneficiary of that. So it's something definitely to celebrate. But I think it has to be caveated on the basis that the 55 million pints are assumed, that the extra 55 million extra pints, I should say, are assumed on England doing well. So no pressure, Harry, but he's going to have to make sure that we get through to at least the semi-finals in order for that figure to stand, and potentially the future and prosperity of the pub industry lies in Harry Kane's hands this year. So
entirely down to him. So yes, we know who to lynch afterwards, don't we? Brilliant, Tom. Well, we are out of time, but thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Ed.
So yes, no pressure on Harry and the boys. Fingers crossed for a great tournament. We will be back in a couple of weeks, or in a week rather, with some more thoughts on the week's news. So until then, keep pulling those pints.